In every corner of Asia, beneath the neon lights and concrete towers, something ancient still lingers. Whispers that travel through the pipes, shadows that outlast the sun, rituals half forgotten, and spirits that never learned how to leave. This is Ghosts of Asia, where haunted traditions bleed into modern life, where the past isn't buried, only hidden behind smart mirrors and elevator doors that never open to the right floor. Tonight's story comes from the heart of Seoul, a glittering city of technology, ambition, and isolation. But beneath its polished surface lies something waterlogged and waiting. Some apartments stay empty for a reason, and in room 808, no one stays for long. Turn off your lights, put your phone face down, and listen closely. You may hear her humming too. The sky over Seoul was the color of cooling ash when Soo Min first unlocked the door to room 808. She didn't expect silence to feel so loud. The kind of silence that settles behind your ears, not around them. The kind that makes you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breath. The soft click of her suitcase wheels over the polished wood floor echoed far too much for a space only 40 square meters wide. It was perfect. The apartment looked exactly like the photos. White walls, black trim, touchless appliances, recessed lighting that responded to voice commands, the latest smart tech in every corner, a motion-sensing faucet, mirror with biometric health scan, AI-controlled blinds. Everything gleamed like it had never been touched. Soo Min exhaled. Finally, a place that didn't come with whispers behind her back, a space untouched by the fallout. She'd left behind everything, her desk at the startup, her apartment in Hongdae, the office rumors, the news headline that paired her name with the word scandal. All of it gone. She was done explaining, done pretending she didn't care. She needed this restart more than she was willing to admit, and room 808, offered at half the usual rent, felt like a cosmic concession. Too new, too clean, too good to question. She left her suitcase by the door and walked barefoot across the cold floor. Even her footsteps felt distant, a sound swallowed too quickly. Her voice echoed when she spoke. AI, lower lights to evening mode. The recessed lights dimmed obediently. She smiled. There were no memories in these walls, no shouting neighbors, no leaky pipes, no one who knew who she used to be. Just her, Soo Min, and the smooth, humming quiet of her new home. It was only much later, when brushing her teeth that night, that she first heard it. A soft, lilting hum. She paused mid-brush, blinking at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The sound had come from behind her, not outside the apartment, but within it. Faint, not music, not static. It was tonal, human, a woman maybe, or a child. Soo Min rinsed her mouth and leaned toward the drain. Nothing, just silence and the faint gurgle of water. She straightened up, laughing at herself. It was probably air bubbles in the pipes. She'd seen a similar complaint in the building's online review, something about the drainage system being sensitive to airlocks. It didn't matter. She was tired, overthinking, maybe even a little paranoid. The past few months had done that to her. Still, she found herself humming the tune on her way to bed. Not because it was catchy, but because it felt familiar. That night, her dreams were dull and wet. No imagery, just the heavy pressure of water and something pressing against her feet. She woke, gasping, heart hammering as if she'd just broken the surface of a deep pool. The apartment was cold, too cold. She checked the thermostat. It had reset itself to 19 degrees C. Strange, but not alarming. Until she noticed the smart speaker light, the soft white glow that usually rested by her bedside, was off. Completely. She tapped it. Nothing. "AI?" she called softly. "Turn on bedroom lights?" Silence. She blinked. Was the network down? The rest of the system seemed fine. The blinds were closed, the fridge hummed quietly, and the entry panel still showed her credentials. But the voice interface was dead, like something had muted it or pulled its plug from inside the walls. Su-min didn't know why, but she didn't go back to sleep right away. She sat on the edge of her bed, listening to the room. Not for the hum, not for anything specific, just listening. And after a long moment, she heard it again. From the bathroom drain, a slow humming sound. The same notes, the same rhythm. Not quite a melody, not quite random either. A child's voice, maybe. Soft, gurgled, underwater. She stood frozen, arms wrapped tightly around herself, not in fear, not yet, but in that sickly, electric stillness the body feels when something doesn't fit, when something violates the expected rhythm of space and safety. The sound stopped. Su-min waited. 10 seconds? 30? A full minute. She tiptoed to the bathroom, flicked on the light, and stared at the drain again. The hum was gone. No sign of anything unusual. She knelt down, touched the edges. The metal felt colder than it should have. She stood and turned to the mirror. Something was different, but she couldn't name it. Her reflection stared back, empty-eyed, pale. Her voice shook slightly when she whispered, "Stop being ridiculous," and returned to bed. But she didn't sleep for hours. And far below, somewhere in the pipes, the water stirred. The next morning, the sun sliced through the blinds in clean, metallic lines, like a barcode across the white walls. Su-min stood barefoot in the kitchen, sipping black coffee that had gone cold before she noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the smart display mounted near the refrigerator. The screen had frozen at 3:08 a.m., the timestamp still blinking. She tapped it. No response. "AI," she said quietly. "Reset display." Nothing. No familiar chime. No cheerful voice welcoming her to a new day. The silence was absolute. A gentle throb pulsed behind her left eye. Maybe from lack of sleep. Maybe from something else. She opened a window. The air outside was thick with Seoul's usual late summer weight. Dust, distant traffic, humidity that clung to the skin like breath. Yet inside, it felt colder. Not the kind of chill that came from poor insulation, but something less explainable, like the temperature dropped when she wasn't paying attention. She glanced toward the bathroom. The door was ajar. Her cat, Sori, sat by the frame, staring into the darkness beyond the threshold. Ears flat, tail flicking, not moving. "Sori?" Su-min called gently. The cat didn't respond, didn't move, didn't blink. She walked over and bent down, reaching toward him. But Sori hissed, a low guttural warning, and bolted across the room. Her hand trembled slightly as she pulled it back. She stood there, heart thudding, and slowly turned her gaze toward the darkened bathroom. From this angle, the drain in the floor was barely visible, a small circle of metal in a pool of sterile tile. The spot seemed darker than the rest, damp, even though she hadn't used the shower since moving in. She shut the door. Hard. The echo lingered longer than it should have. That afternoon, she submitted a tech support ticket through the building's tenant portal. Subject: Smart System Unresponsive. Description: Voice commands non-functional since 3:08 a.m. Display frozen. Speaker offline. Thermostat reset itself overnight. Request technician visit ASAP. The automated reply arrived instantly. Thank you. A technician will contact you within 48 hours. She wasn't sure if that comforted her or not. By the second night, the silence had shape. It wasn't just quiet, it was weighted. It pressed in around her like wet cloth, and it seemed to grow heavier the moment the sun dipped behind the skyline. At 10:24 p.m., she unplugged the smart speaker, waited 10 seconds, and plugged it back in. No lights, no sound, no boot-up sequence. She tested the bathroom lights. They worked. She flushed the toilet. It worked too. Everything else seemed fine. Just the AI. Just the part that listened. She sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and typed Room 808 Problems into a local tenant forum. Nothing came up at first. Just listings, positive reviews, praise for the amenities. Then she noticed something odd. One listing for the building's exact address, posted 3 months ago, had a comment thread with 15 replies. But when she clicked the link, this thread has been deleted by the site moderator. The cached preview still showed a line of text. Anyone else hear the singing at night? Su Min stared at the screen, her breath caught somewhere just under her ribs. She checked the history of the user who'd posted it. Account suspended. Her skin prickled. She closed the laptop and turned to look out the window. From her height, 8 floors up, the city felt strangely distant, as if it were behind glass. Lives moving, lights blinking, but all muted, as if she'd stepped 1 degree sideways from reality and now watched it from inside a snow globe. She whispered aloud, "I'm just tired, that's all." And then, just to prove something to herself, she turned to the empty room and said, "AI, play jazz." Silence. "AI, are you there?" Nothing. And then, a soft clicking sound. From the bathroom. She stood, clicked on the hallway light, took a step toward the bathroom door, and stopped. The door was now shut. She hadn't closed it. Her hand hovered over the doorknob. She turned it slowly, feeling resistance like the mechanism was too stiff, and pushed inward. The bathroom light was off. She reached in and flicked it on. There, in the center of the white tile floor, was a single wet footprint, small, bare, pointing toward the mirror. She inhaled sharply, took a step closer. No other footprints, just the one. Her eyes darted toward the mirror. It was fogged, just slightly, the way it might be after someone breathed close to the surface. But she hadn't showered, hadn't even used hot water. She wiped the mirror with her hand. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw something behind her, a flicker of black hair disappearing into the edge of the door frame. But when she spun around, the room was empty, and the drain was humming. Not loud, not melodic, but unmistakably human, like someone trying to soothe themselves in the dark. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she curled on the couch with all the lights on, her cat pressed tightly against her legs. Every few minutes she'd glance toward the hallway, expecting movement, listening for sound, but the apartment remained still. When morning came, she felt hollow, as if something had scraped the inside of her skull during the night and left it echoing. The tech support still hadn't called. Later that day, she went to the building's front office. A young woman in a crisp white uniform greeted her with a practiced smile. "Yes, Miss Lee, how can I help you?" She hesitated. What could she say? My drain is singing? My AI stopped listening? My mirror fogs up when I'm not in the room? She forced a smile. "Just checking on my support ticket. My smart system isn't working, and the voice assistant has been down." The receptionist typed briefly on her computer. "Oh, yes, that was marked as resolved yesterday." "What?" "It says the AI reconnected at 3:08 a.m. this morning." Su Min froze. I didn't do that." The receptionist glanced up. "Well, the system log says it rebooted successfully. Maybe there was a glitch. These things happen in high-density networks." Su Min nodded slowly, then turned to leave. But just before she stepped out, she paused. "Can I ask something else?" "Of course." "Has anyone else complained about room 808? The receptionist's smile thinned slightly. "No, why do you ask?" "Just wondering." The girl tilted her head. "You're the first tenant in that unit for over a year. It stayed vacant longer than usual, but some people are just picky." "Right." She left the office and didn't look back. That night, she tested something. She turned off the bathroom light and left the door wide open. She set her phone to record audio and placed it on the bathroom sink, angled toward the drain. She shut her bedroom door, closed the blinds, left the lights on, and waited. 3 a.m. Nothing. 3:03. The smart display flickered, then reset. 3:05. Her phone screen, visible from the open bathroom door, flashed faintly, as if the camera had activated. And at 3:08 a.m., she heard it again. The humming, now louder, like it was closer to the surface. She crept to the door, breath caught in her throat, and peered into the bathroom. No movement, but the sound was there, real, measured, familiar, and horribly, achingly sad. She stepped inside. The phone was still recording. She reached for it with a trembling hand. The moment her fingers touched the screen, the humming stopped. She grabbed the phone, backed out of the room, and shut the door. She didn't play the recording until sunrise. When she did, her blood ran cold. There was no humming, only silence, until the final 3 seconds. Then, faint, warped, and childlike, a voice whispered, "Su Mung." She dropped the phone. The audio file played on loop, over and over again. Silence for nearly 2 minutes, and then, at the very end, the voice, soft, gurgled, almost lost beneath a layer of static. "Su Min." Just 2 syllables, just her name, but the way it was spoken, drawn out, breathless, as if whispered through water, made her skin crawl. She tried running the file through a sound editor. Nothing strange in the waveform. No spikes. No obvious signs of tampering. It was real. It was there. And yet when she increased the volume, isolated the audio and played it through headphones, she swore she could hear something else beneath it. Not words, not melody, but breath, wet and slow. She deleted the file, then restored it from the trash 30 seconds later. She needed to remember it hadn't been a dream. The apartment no longer felt like hers. She noticed it in the little things, how the shadows stretched longer along the hallway even when the blinds were fully open, how the air always seemed humid no matter how many times she adjusted the thermostat, how the faucet sometimes sputtered just once before the water flowed, as if something was blocking the pipe and letting go. Sorry, our cat, had taken to hiding under the couch. He wouldn't go near the bathroom anymore, wouldn't eat if his bowl was left too close to the door. Once she caught him staring directly at the drain, ears flat, body stiff. He didn't hiss this time. He just stared, like he was waiting for something to move. That night, Sumin avoided the bathroom altogether. She brushed her teeth in the kitchen sink, lights on, music playing softly through her phone. The smart speaker was still dead, even though the building logs claimed it was reconnected. At 2:50 a.m., she sat on her bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. Her eyes were dry, her limbs heavy. She didn't want to fall asleep. But eventually, exhaustion forced her under. She dreamed of footsteps in water. Not walking, wading. She stood in a flooded hallway. The wallpaper peeled in strips. Rust floated in the water like blood. The lights flickered overhead. There were doors on both sides, warped and swollen from the moisture. One of them was slightly open. Faint light leaked through the gap. She stepped closer. From inside, she heard humming, a tune she knew, one note at a time. She touched the door, and it sucked her in. She fell forward into black water, cold, viscous, clinging. She couldn't breathe, couldn't see. Something pulled at her ankle, and she kicked, flailing upward, mouth open in a scream that never left her lungs. Sumin woke, gasping. The room was dark, silent, except for the faint, distant sound of humming. She didn't move, didn't even blink, just lay still, listening. It wasn't coming from the bathroom. It was coming from inside the walls, somewhere behind her headboard, or maybe lower, maybe beneath the floor. And this time, it wasn't just humming. It was the same tune she dreamed, the same lullaby, a melody her mother used to hum to her when she was a child, before everything went wrong, before the hospital, before the breakdowns, before her mother began screaming at the walls about the girl in the pipes. Sumin didn't go back to sleep. At sunrise, she pulled the old plastic storage bin from the back of her closet, the one she'd taken from her childhood home, untouched for years. Inside were faded notebooks, old drawings, a birthday card her mother had made when she was 6, and a small stack of loose music sheets. Childish, hand-drawn notes scrawled with a marker. No composer, no title, but one of them had a pattern she recognized. 8 notes, simple, repetitive. The same 8 notes she'd been hearing every night. She ran her finger across the page. There, in faint pencil beside the notes, her mother had written, "She sings to the lonely." A chill ran up Sumin's spine. She stared at those words until her vision blurred. Her mother had claimed a girl lived inside the drains, a girl who sang to her, a girl no one else could hear. Everyone had called it schizophrenia, hallucinations brought on by stress, trauma, madness. But what if it wasn't? What if her mother hadn't been delusional? What if she had simply heard her first? Later that day, Sumin checked the water pressure in every faucet. The kitchen ran fine. The bathroom sputtered, like something caught in the pipe or something unwilling to move. She placed a bowl under the faucet and turned the water on low and waited. The first few seconds were normal. Then the flow slowed. A strange choking sound bubbled up through the spout. Then a sharp gasp, the sound of a breath. She turned the faucet off instantly, backed away. Her heart pounded so hard she thought she might throw up. She left the bathroom door open this time. She needed to know if it would close again on its own. It didn't. But just past midnight, she saw something new. Condensation on the mirror. A slow fog forming, even though the lights were off and no water had run for hours. As the glass fogged, a faint shape appeared in the mist. Not a word, not a message. A small handprint, pressed against the glass from the inside. Sumin couldn't scream, couldn't move. She stared at it until her knees nearly gave out. Then the light flickered, and the handprint vanished. The next morning, she walked into a neighborhood hardware store and bought a drain camera, the kind plumbers use to check for blockages. She told herself it was for peace of mind, that she needed to prove there was nothing in the pipe, no girl, no ghost, no humming thing waiting below. Just water, just rusted metal, just silence. Back at the apartment, she knelt on the bathroom floor and carefully fed the camera down into the drain. The feed appeared on her phone. Gray, static-filled images flickered across the screen. Smooth metal, scratches, hair, gunk. Deeper. The pipe curved. More static. She maneuvered the camera slowly, then stopped. Something moved. Just a flicker. She rewound the footage, slowed it, and saw it. In the darkness, a single human eye, wide and unblinking, staring directly into the lens. She yanked the camera out, nearly dropping her phone in the process. There was nothing on the cable. No water, no sign of anything having touched it. Just that one frame, one eye, watching her from the inside. She left the apartment that night, stayed at a 24-hour cafe until dawn, her back to the wall, headphones in, unable to focus on anything but the sound of water. Every time someone used the bathroom, she flinched. She felt dirty, contaminated, like she had invited something in. Like it was growing stronger every time she listened. She remembered what her mother had once whispered during one of her episodes, long before the hospital, long before the collapse. She waits in the water. She hums to the hollow ones. And once you hear her song, she knows your name.
The train rocked gently as it pulled through the edges of the city, leaving behind Seoul's cold steel skyline for the slower, older heartbeat of the suburbs. Sumin stared out the window, watching rows of low buildings flicker past, convenience stores, closed shops, rusted rooftops. The further she moved from her apartment, the more her shoulders relaxed, and yet something inside her stayed clenched, twisted tight like thread pulled too long. She hadn't been back to her aunt's neighborhood in years, not since her mother died. Her hand trembled as she rang the doorbell. It took a while before the door creaked open, revealing a short, soft-faced woman in a worn gray sweater and thick glasses. Aunt Yun's eyes widened, then filled with something cautious. "Suman?" she asked, as if unsure the woman in front of her was real. Suman managed a nod. "Hi, I know I should have called, but I didn't know if you'd—" "Nonsense," her aunt said, pulling her inside with surprising strength. "You're always welcome here. Come in, come in." The house smelled the same. Boiled barley tea, dust, old furniture that had absorbed years of voices and memories. It was small and quiet, far removed from the humming glow of modern soul. The kind of place where ghosts didn't hide behind glass or whisper through speakers. They just lived in the walls. They sat across from each other at the table. Neither touched the tea. "I moved into a new place," Suman began. Her aunt nodded. "In the city?" "Yes, Gongbuk, a high-rise." "Good." Her aunt paused. "Starting over?" Suman hesitated. Then, quietly, "Trying to." There was a long silence between them. Then her aunt said, without looking up, "You've seen her, haven't you?" Suman froze. The teacup trembled in her hand. "Who?" "The girl in the water." Her heart dropped. She hadn't said anything about the drain, or the humming, or the camera. Nothing. And yet here it was, spoken plainly, as if the name had been waiting between them. I've heard something," Suman admitted, barely above a whisper. "In the pipes, at night, a tune, like humming." Her aunt nodded slowly. "That song," she said, "used to drive your mother mad." She led Suman into a small storage room and opened a metal filing cabinet with trembling hands. From the back, she pulled a thin plastic folder. Inside were sketches, scraps of music paper, and medical documents. Suman flipped through them, pulse racing. Drawings of a girl, always the same: wet hair, large dark eyes, small mouth open mid-song. Handwritten notes from the psychiatric hospital. Patient reports recurring auditory hallucination in the form of a melody. Claims melody originates from the bathroom drain. Patient insists spirit is lonely, not violent, seeks companionship. Diagnosis: paranoid schizophrenia with delusional features. There were pages and pages. Some notes written in her mother's looping handwriting. "She only sings to those who've been emptied. She remembers me. I didn't find her, she found me. Suman shouldn't hear her, she's still clean." Suman's fingers went cold. "What did she mean?" she asked. Her aunt sighed. "Your mother believed the girl was a spirit that found people who were hollow, people who had no one left. She said the humming was a lure. She thought she was being haunted?" "Not haunted," her aunt corrected gently. "Chosen." Suman's breath hitched. As the sun began to set, casting amber light through the lace curtains, her aunt sat back with a distant look in her eyes. "Your mother was never the same after she lost your father. And after what happened at her old apartment, the sounds, the hallucinations, she was never able to rest again." "Her old apartment?" Suman asked. Her aunt nodded. "Small studio in Unpyeong. The building was old, barely standing, water damage everywhere. She moved out after claiming the pipes sang to her, but by then she was already unraveling." "Did anyone believe her?" "No," she said simply. "We thought she was broken." A pause. "But sometimes," she continued, her voice barely audible, I think the spirit is older than just a single building, that it moves, like water, finds new places to settle, new people to sing to. Suman felt something cold gather at the base of her spine. "Do you know the tune?" she asked, her voice nearly shaking. Her aunt looked at her for a long moment, then stood. She went to a drawer and pulled out a yellowed sheet of paper. On it were 8 notes, hand-drawn, simple, and above them, in faded ink, "Lullaby for the girl beneath the water." It was the exact melody from her dreams, the same tune from the pipes. Suman took it in her hands. Her mother had drawn this, not imagined it, not hallucinated it. She had heard it, just like Suman did now, and she had tried to warn her. That night, back in her apartment, Suman sat on the couch with the lights on, the sheet music in her lap. The air was thick. The building was too quiet. Outside, the wind rattled faintly against the glass. Inside, her smart display blinked once, then returned to black. 3:03 a.m. She stared at the clock. A moment later, the bathroom light turned on by itself, then off, then on again. The smart speaker crackled. No words, just white noise. Then a faint note played, one of the 8, then another. A melody slowly forming, note by note. Her hands shook violently as she clutched the paper. "She only sings to the lonely. She remembers me. Suman shouldn't hear her. She's still clean." Was she? Was she still clean? Or had the spirit already decided otherwise? She stood and walked toward the bathroom. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the door, it was slightly ajar. The light inside flickered, and from the drain, the humming began again. Soft, familiar, grieving. Suman stared at her reflection in the mirror, but it didn't move. Not at first. And then slowly, it smiled. Not her smile, something else. The corners of her mouth in the glass lifted just slightly, while her real face remained frozen. The light buzzed louder, the tune rose in volume, and then the mirror fogged over fast, as if someone was breathing heavily on it from the other side. One line appeared in the steam. "You heard her, too." The next night, Sumin didn't wait for 3:08. She prepared for it. Every light in the apartment was on. Her phone was fully charged, recording on both front and rear cameras. She set up her laptop to stream to a private server, just in case something happened and she couldn't explain it afterward. On the whiteboard she'd magnetized to her refrigerator, she wrote the time down in thick red marker. 3:08 a.m., a time that had repeated itself in every glitch, every chill, every breathless wake-up call. She didn't know why that minute mattered, only that it did. At 2:55 a.m., the room grew colder. She checked the thermostat, still locked at 24 degrees Celsius. She stood barefoot in the hallway, staring at the bathroom door. It was closed, but not latched, just slightly ajar, like it had exhaled. Sumin took a slow breath. The air tasted faintly metallic, like rust and wet pennies. Her phone timer ticked forward. 3:07:43, 3:07:52. Her chest tightened. The lights flickered. Once, twice. 3:08. All power dropped. Not just the lights. Her phone, her laptop, her backup battery. Everything went black at once.
The silence that followed was not empty. It was crowded, filled with something she could not name, a presence, like someone was standing directly behind her, breathing gently into her neck. She didn't dare turn around. Then, from inside the bathroom, behind the door, came the unmistakable sound of water running. She hadn't used the sink, hadn't flushed, nothing should be on. But the water flowed, gurgled, spilled, and beneath it, the tune began again. Soft humming, this time higher pitched. A child's voice, not sorrowful, not angry, inviting. She pushed the door open. The bathroom was drenched. Water pooled on the floor, clear and shimmering under the moonlight leaking through the frosted window. The faucet was bone dry. The sink hadn't overflowed, but the water was still there, still moving, as if it had spilled up from the drain. At the center of the pool, something floated. A toy. Small, faded, a rubber duck, edges worn. Su-min bent closer, and she saw something inked on the duck's side. Smudged handwriting, barely legible. One word. Yunji. She whispered it aloud, and the humming stopped. In the morning, everything had reset. Her phone turned on, the power returned, the lights worked, the smart display glowed politely. The bathroom, however, was dry. No sign of the puddle, or the duck, or the name. She scrolled through her phone's storage. The videos were corrupted, black static, silent, data missing. Only one still frame had survived. A single screenshot, blurry, dark. But at the center of the frame, just barely visible, was a reflection in the bathroom mirror. A small figure, long black hair, head tilted, face blurred as if the lens couldn't hold her. She wasn't standing in the room. She was inside the mirror, watching. Su-min called the building manager that afternoon. She lied, said she'd had a small leak, wanted someone to inspect the plumbing. The manager arrived an hour later with a clipboard and a practiced smile. He checked the sink, the faucet, the floor tiles. "Everything looks fine, ma'am," he said. "No signs of damage, pipes are clear." She nodded, then asked as casually as she could, "Do you know anything about previous tenants in this unit?" He blinked. "Not much. We don't keep detailed records. But has anyone ever filed strange reports about noises, water pressure, anything at night?" He hesitated, just for a second, then smiled again. "Not that I know of. Room 808 has had a few short-term leases, but that's not unusual in the city." "How many people lived here before me?" Maybe 3, 4, he said vaguely. "Could have been 5. Honestly, no one sticks around long in these places. People move on quickly." Move on. Or disappear. That night, Su-min set another trap. She placed a bowl of white rice just inside the bathroom door, a traditional Korean offering for the dead. Her grandmother used to leave them outside after funerals to help wandering spirits find peace. She also placed a stick of incense in the hallway, lit it, and let the smoke curl toward the ceiling. At 3:08, she stood at the edge of her bedroom, watching the hallway with wide eyes. The lights didn't flicker this time. Instead, the rice bowl tipped over on its own, spilling silently across the floor. And a small footprint appeared in the grains. Bare, wet, child-sized. One step forward, then another, then gone, like something had stood there briefly before stepping through. Su-min fell to her knees. Tears spilled from her eyes, not from fear, but from the sudden overwhelming feeling of grief. It wasn't hers, it belonged to someone else. It swept through her like a wave, cold, ancient, aching, a sadness so deep that it had sunk below language. She clutched her chest and wept without knowing why. Somewhere nearby, a child's voice began to hum again, soft, gentle, right outside the bedroom door. The next morning, she awoke on the floor. The rice was gone. Only the incense stick remained, burned all the way down to ash. Her phone buzzed. An email notification. No sender. No subject line. Just a single attachment. An old photograph. Black and white. A group of children in uniforms standing outside a building that looked half-finished. Muddy ground, no landscaping. A woman stood in the back row, and beside her, near the far right, was a little girl. Head down, hair soaked, arms folded tightly. No name on the photo, no description, but Su-min recognized the girl, even in grainy monochrome. She took the image to a print shop and asked the attendant to scan it at high resolution, then enhanced it at home, zoomed in on the girl's shirt, a name tag partially obscured by her arm, but 2 letters were visible. G. She thought back to the rubber duck. Yoonji. It was a name, and the spirit in her apartment had one. Now it wasn't just a ghost, it was a person, a child who once lived and died, and wanted to be remembered. But remembered for what? Why was she here? Why room 808? Why 3:08 a.m.? That night, Su-min placed the photograph on the floor near the drain. Then she wrote on a sticky note, "Are you Yoonji?" She went to bed with all the lights off. At exactly 3:08 a.m., she heard movement, a dragging sound, and then a faint creaking. She got up, heart hammering. The sticky note was gone. In its place, written on the fogged mirror, in blocky, uneven handwriting, "You remember." Su-min didn't leave the apartment for 3 days. She kept the blinds drawn, the lights dimmed, and her phone on silent. The world beyond her walls faded, blurred like a dream she couldn't return to. There was only this place now, only this hour, this ghost, this tune, and the name, Unji. The little girl who hummed through pipes, who remembered her mother, who now remembered her. Su-min opened her laptop and began searching. She started with the name, Unji plus orphanage plus soul. Too many results. She added filters, flood plus fire plus death plus construction site. Then slowly the noise fell away. One link, then another, then one that made her fingers freeze. Archived news report, August 1986. Local orphanage suffers tragic fire and flooding. 12 feared dead. She clicked. The article was yellowed by age, poorly scanned. In the early hours of August 22nd, a storm triggered massive flash flooding that overwhelmed the drainage systems of an orphanage located near the northeastern hills of Seoul. The sudden water pressure caused structural damage that led to a partial collapse of the west wing. Simultaneously, an electrical fault caused a fire to break out in one of the lower dormitories. Firefighters battled both flames and rising waters as they attempted rescue. While most children were evacuated, 12 remain unaccounted for. Among the missing is a young girl known only as Unji, approximately 6 years old. Her body was never recovered. The orphanage was closed and later demolished. In the 2000s, the land was cleared and rezoned for residential development. Today, it's home to the redacted apartment complex. Sumin's heart slammed in her chest. That was her building. She opened Google Maps, searched the coordinates. There it was. The foundation of her high-rise sat directly atop the bones of a tragedy no one wanted to remember. A place where children had died, drowned and burned beneath the silence of bureaucracy and cement. She searched building records, construction permits, engineering blueprints. She traced everything back to 2004 when the first dig broke ground. Most of the reports were sanitized, clean. Sanitized language like site remediation and grade-level clearance replaced what she now understood to be the erasure of a mass grave. But one document stood out: a digitized scan of an old survey map before the apartment complex was built. The original plot showed the orphanage layout: dormitories, play yard, kitchens, boiler room. And near the bottom, in faded ink, Room 8. Her eyes scanned the new floor plan of her building. Room 808 was built directly above where Room 8 used to be. The same location, the same cursed foundation. She whispered the numbers aloud. 8, 0, 8. 8 and 0. Nothing and everything. 2 mirrors, 2 holes. Then 8 again. The number that never ends, the shape of eternity. A closed loop. A trap. Sumin stood in her bathroom and stared at the drain. What if the ghost wasn't just trapped? What if the location was the key? A spiritual echo, replaying every night at the exact moment the waters rose. 308. Was that the time the fire began? Or the moment Unji drowned? She had to know. She contacted the city archives. Most of the old police records had been redacted or lost. But a clerk, sounding half asleep, sent her one file, scanned in poor quality, simply labeled Incident Report, Orphanage Fire. Most of it was illegible, except for one passage. At 3:08 a.m., structural failure of west drainage system noted. Pressure caused backflow through the floor drains. Children were trapped inside dormitory room 8. Emergency services unable to breach fire door due to flooding and flame exposure. One child last seen by caretaker near drain, attempting to escape, referred to as Unji, disappeared from view, presumed drowned. No remains recovered. That night, Sumin couldn't breathe. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting each second past 3 a.m. She no longer feared the hour. She expected it, waited for it. 3:06, 3:07, 3:08. The hum came like always, soft at first, then closer, more present, and then a new sound, dripping from the ceiling. She sat up and looked above. A single drop of water formed in the center of her ceiling and fell, vanishing before it hit the floor. Then another, and then another. She walked to the bathroom. The mirror was already fogged, not from steam, from breath. And in the center, scrawled in a child's hand, "Help me come up." The next morning, she bought a blueprint of the building from a construction records office. On it, she traced the drain pipes, the maintenance tunnels, the basement levels. And there, at the very bottom, was a structure that didn't match the new foundation, an older chamber, sealed, labeled simply Sub-Basement B. No access points from inside the building, but a maintenance hatch outside the perimeter, behind the dumpsters near the loading dock. She circled it in red ink and waited for nightfall. At midnight, dressed in black, she slipped out of her apartment and made her way down the emergency stairwell. The building was eerily still, too still, as if the walls were holding their breath. She crept outside into the back lot, past security cameras and discarded boxes. There, half buried in moss and concrete dust, was the rusted door to the hatch. No lock, just a metal bar. She pulled it open. The smell hit her instantly. Mold, wet rust, rotting insulation. She climbed down, step by trembling step, into the dark. Her flashlight flickered. The walls were lined with rusted pipes, corroded switches, faded signs in Hangul from another decade. She followed the map, left, right, down, until she reached a sealed metal door, warped and scarred. A label above it, barely illegible. Dormitory B, room 8. Her hands shook as she turned the latch. The door creaked open and revealed a room still partially underwater. Knee-deep, the walls were scorched, the ceiling blackened. Beds melted into rusted frames. Toys floated like dead flowers. And in the center, a single drain, larger than the one in her bathroom. Still open, still breathing. She stepped into the water. Cold, stagnant. It rose past her calves, chilling her bones. She knelt beside the drain and whispered, "Unji, I found you." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, the water around her began to ripple, and from the drain came a single clear note, the first tone of the lullaby, then another, and another, until the full melody played, gurgled, trembling, as if the pipes themselves were singing. Then from the far wall, something moved. A shadow, small, pale. A child. Standing ankle-deep, eyes wide and dark. She stared at Sumin, then tilted her head and began to hum. Sumim didn't scream, didn't run. She stood there, shaking, lips trembling, and sang the next line of the lullaby aloud, note for note, word for word. The girl smiled, a thin, sorrowful smile, then turned and vanished back into the shadows. Back in her apartment, soaked and shivering, Sumin opened her bedroom window. The night air felt different, still haunted, still heavy, but known now. The ghost had a name, a face, a death that no one had mourned properly, and she had finally been seen.
Sumin awoke on the bathroom floor. Her clothes were damp, her skin cold. She had no memory of returning from the sub-basement, only fragments. Water, a song, a girl standing waist-deep in shadows, a small hand reaching for hers, and something else. Whispers, dozens of them, all around her, layered like voices in a broken choir, calling her name, asking her to stay, begging her not to forget. She stood slowly, knees aching, spine stiff. Her mirror was fogged again. Words scrawled in childish Hangul stretched across the surface. You came, you saw, but you didn't listen. She reached out to wipe it clean. Her fingers brushed the glass, and the surface moved. Not like condensation, like skin, soft, cold, quivering.
She stumbled back, heart slamming against her ribs. The glass cleared slowly. No reflection, just her bathroom. Empty, dry, silent. Later that day, she sat at her kitchen table with the hand-drawn blueprint of the building. The orphanage dormitory, now flooded and buried, still haunted her. She couldn't forget the layout, the rusted bunk beds, the melted toys, the single open drain in the center of the room where something breathed beneath the water. She sketched it in her notebook. 1 drain, 12 bunk beds, 1 missing girl. She wrote the name again, Inji. Then she added another line beneath it. She wasn't the only one. Because in that room, she hadn't just heard one voice, she'd heard many. That night, she woke at 3:08 a.m. to a familiar sound, the humming. But this time, it wasn't coming from the bathroom. It was coming from inside her bedroom wall. She pressed her ear against it. The tune was louder now, stronger, as if the wall itself was vibrating with song. And then something new. A knock. Just once. From the other side. Not the neighbor. Inside the wall. Her heart raced. She knocked back. Silence. Then 3 slow knocks in return. Her breath caught. She whispered, "What do you want?" And the mirror in the hallway, the one beside the front door, fogged instantly. She ran to it, her bare feet cold against the floor. The words appeared slowly, trembling in the condensation. "You came, you saw, but you didn't listen." She reached out to wipe it clean. Her fingers brushed the glass, and the surface moved. Not like condensation, like skin, soft, cold, quivering. She stumbled back, heart slamming against her ribs. The glass cleared slowly. No reflection, just her bathroom. Empty, dry, silent. Later that day, she sat at her kitchen table with the hand-drawn blueprint of the building. The orphanage dormitory, now flooded and buried, still haunted her. She couldn't forget the layout, the rusted bunk beds, the melted toys, the single open drain in the center of the room where something breathed beneath the water. She sketched it in her notebook. 1 drain, 12 bunk beds, 1 missing girl. She wrote the name again, Inji. Then she added another line beneath it. She wasn't the only one. Because in that room, she hadn't just heard one voice, she'd heard many. One evening, she returned from the grocery store to find her apartment unlocked. Nothing was missing, no signs of forced entry. But on the mirror in the bathroom, someone had drawn a new picture in the steam. A small stick-figure girl, long hair, a smile, and beside her, another figure, taller, no face, just a heart drawn between them. Below it, one word, friend. Su-min dropped the groceries and wept. She began to research water spirits in Korean folklore. There were stories of mulguishin, water ghosts, souls of those who drowned in despair and never received proper rites. They lingered near wells, rivers, drains, often seeking warmth, not revenge, just recognition. Some tales said they hummed, others that they whispered through bubbling water. One text, an old shamanic journal, described a ritual. To calm the weeping spirit of water, offer rice, warmth, and a name. Hold her hand as if she were your own. Su-min bought a bowl carved from dark wood. She placed it beside the drain and filled it with warm rice, then lit a single candle and sat beside it. She whispered, "I remember you. I see you." The water gurgled once, and from the sink came a low hum, barely audible, but peaceful. And for the first time, the drain didn't feel like a hole in the earth. It felt like an open palm. Later that night, she had a dream. She stood in the flooded dormitory again, but this time, it wasn't ruined. The lights were on. Children's laughter echoed down the hallway. And at the center, in room 8, sat In-ji. Dry, smiling. She held a small rubber duck, the one Su-min had seen float in her bathroom. She looked up and said in perfect clarity, "It's almost time." Su-min knelt beside her. "What happens then?" In-ji didn't answer. She just hummed, the same tune, the one Su-min's mother had tried to forget, the one she now sang without fear. And then the dream flooded. A rush of water, a scream, a door slamming shut behind her. She woke up choking, alone, soaked in sweat, but with one lingering memory. In the dream, when the water rose, she wasn't drowning. She was being pulled down gently, like a child leading her home. By now, 3:08 a.m. no longer startled her. It came like clockwork, as natural as her own breath. But what had once been fear was now familiarity. She had stopped trying to fix the smart devices, stopped submitting tickets to the building management, stopped denying what she knew in her bones. Her apartment wasn't just haunted, it was a mouth. And at its center was a drain that sang. Su-min spent the next morning reviewing the footage she captured from the maintenance tunnels. The sub-basement, the flooded dormitory, the rusted bunk beds, all recorded in glitchy fragments. Much of the data was corrupted, unusable, but one file played clearly. It was from the moment she first stepped into room 8. In the center of the frame, as the camera shook in her trembling hands, she could see it. A girl's silhouette, standing just behind a rusted pipe, barely visible in the shadows. She hadn't seen her in person, but the camera had. She paused the frame, zoomed in. No eyes, no features, just a presence, watching, waiting. She played the footage again, and this time she heard something she hadn't before. A voice, barely audible, warped by the static, but unmistakable. Down, come down. She drew a map on her bedroom wall, tracing the plumbing system like veins beneath the skin of the building. All of it led downward, to one place, the sealed chamber beneath the maintenance tunnels, the original drainage chamber, the last place water flowed before it disappeared into the city's underground. If the ghost wanted to be found, that's where she would be. That night, Su-min returned to the hatch. She brought gloves, a flashlight, a waterproof camera, and a crowbar. The hallway down was colder this time, darker. The air hung heavier, the walls damp with condensation, even though the weather outside was dry. When she reached the familiar rusted door to room 8, she hesitated. The door was already open. She hadn't left it that way. She stepped inside. The water was deeper now, rising up to her thighs. It was no longer still. It moved, gently, like something breathing beneath its surface. She aimed the flashlight at the far wall and froze. New markings covered the tiles. Small handprints, hundreds of them, pressed into the soot and algae, as if a dozen children had crawled across the walls, reaching for escape. She turned slowly. More handprints behind her, above her, on the ceiling. At the center of the room, the drain was open, a black void. No grate, no bottom, just darkness and water and song. She crouched near the drain, water lapping against her skin, and dropped a small microphone into the hole. The recording began immediately. A hum, then a voice. "Don't leave. You said you would stay. You promised." Sumin dropped the microphone. It vanished into the drain with a soft splash. She stared into the hole, and for the first time, she saw something move. Not a shadow, not a shape, but hair, floating just beneath the surface. Long, black, drifting like seaweed, and a pale hand, reaching upward. She gasped and fell backward. The water surged around her, just once, like a wave had passed beneath her feet, and then stilled. The hand was gone. She fled back up the ladder, lungs burning, heart thudding in her ears. When she slammed the hatch shut behind her, the night air felt like fire in her chest. She didn't return to her apartment right away. She sat outside on the curb, shivering, soaked, her shoes leaving muddy prints across the concrete. Then she noticed something. A wet trail. Footprints. Not hers. Small. Bare. Leading away from the hatch. Toward the building. Toward her home. Inside, the apartment smelled like rain. The lights were flickering. The smart display blinked on and off. And on her bathroom mirror, a new message. "It's almost open." She stared at the words, then at the floor. A slow puddle was forming again, clear water spilling gently from the edges of the drain. But this time, the water was warm, almost like bath water, and floating in it, a child's hair ribbon, faded pink, tied carefully. She picked it up with trembling fingers. No mold, no rot, as if it had just been taken off. She stayed awake until morning, but the apartment stayed quiet, still. Only the occasional soft rattle from the pipes beneath her feet. She placed the ribbon in a small glass jar on her bedside table, an offering, or maybe a promise. She wasn't sure anymore. The next afternoon, she received a phone call from an unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. The message was garbled, full of static, but at the end, she could make out a word. Room 8. And then, a child humming. The line went dead. She took a taxi to the municipal library and requested access to construction archives from the 1980s. It took hours, but eventually she found it. Original blueprints of the orphanage's drainage system. There was one detail missing from the newer maps. A sealed tunnel, running beneath the dormitory, straight into an unused underground cistern. A place where runoff water collected during storms. A place where someone small could hide or drown and never be found. Sumin returned home in a daze. She opened her laptop, typed a message in a private forum. "Has anyone heard of a ghost who sings through drains?" The responses came quickly, some mocking, some curious, but one stood out. From an anonymous user, "You're not the first." Attached was a newspaper clipping, unpublished, a draft, dated 2009. Headline: "Women found dead in bathtub, electrical short blamed for drowning." But the article never made it to print. In the margin, the reporter had handwritten, "Victim was humming when neighbors broke in. No music source found. Water came from floor drain. No cause confirmed." She stared at the name. Room 808. 15 years ago. The unit she lived in now. She stood in her bathroom, looked at the drain, and whispered, "Why me?" Silence. Then a single drop of water struck the porcelain, then another. Then the mirror fogged, and 3 words appeared. "You heard first." That night, she sat by the drain again, lit a candle, placed the ribbon beside it, and sang the lullaby one more time, note by note, voice trembling. And halfway through the final verse, she stopped because the voice that finished it wasn't hers. It started with a name that had no home. Room 8. Every document Sumin uncovered from the orphanage era referenced it. Every floor plan placed it in the same wing, the same location. But when she searched modern records, permits, blueprints, inspection files, Room 8 was gone, erased, no mention. As if the room had never existed, as if it had been scrubbed from the world by someone who wanted to forget what happened there. But ghosts remember, even when the living choose not to. She visited the building's permit office, requested architectural drawings for the basement levels. The clerk frowned. "That wing was never built," he said, tapping on his keyboard. "The final plans cut that section. Budget issues. There's no room 8. "But it's in the original orphanage records," Sumin pressed. "It was part of the West Dormitory." The man shrugged. "So I guess it was demolished before the foundation was laid." She leaned forward. What if it wasn't demolished? He paused, then smiled, polite but distant. "Miss, sometimes the past just sinks. That's what concrete's for." That night, the mirror didn't fog. The drains didn't hum. But Sumin couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to a silence that didn't feel empty. It felt suppressed, muted, like someone was holding their breath below her floorboards. She whispered into the darkness, "Are you still here?" The light flickered once, then the smart display blinked. Just once. It displayed a message. Yes. She found the janitor by accident, an old man sweeping the lower stairwells at the far end of the parking structure where the building's original concrete still showed through the paint. He didn't wear the standard uniform, no badge, no name tag, but his broom moved slowly, with memory. She approached carefully. "Excuse me, were you here when this building was first constructed?" The man didn't look up, but he answered, "I've been here longer than the walls." Sumin hesitated. "There used to be a room, room 8, in the old orphanage. You remember it?" He stopped sweeping, stood still. "I told them not to build over it." His voice was raspy, like someone who hadn't spoken aloud in years. "They said it was just water, just bad luck, but I saw her." Sumin's heart pounded. "You saw who?" "The girl. He turned to her then. His eyes were yellowed but sharp. She would crawl through the pipes, cry at night. Not angry, not mean, just forgotten. He looked down at his hands. I sealed the old hatch myself, welded it shut. They paid me to bury it, said it was better that way. He glanced at her. But you opened it again, didn't you? Sumin nodded slowly. He smiled, a sorrowful, knowing smile. She always finds someone new, someone hollow. Back in her apartment, she ran her fingers along the bathroom tiles, looking for seams, cracks, secrets. She found one behind the toilet, a tile slightly looser than the others. She pried it off. Behind it, darkness. Not insulation, not pipe, just a hole, a narrow shaft leading down. She reached inside, her hand trembling, and touched something cold. Not metal, not water, wood. She pulled it out. A small nameplate, warped, burned at the edges, but the engraving was still legible. Room 8, Dormitory B. She dropped it. It hit the tile with a sharp clatter that echoed far too long. That night, at 3:08 a.m., her apartment went dark again. Not all at once, room by room. The bedroom first, then the kitchen, then the hallway, until only the bathroom light remained. And the humming returned. Not soft this time, louder, layered, voices, dozens of them, children crying, singing, begging, and above them all one voice, small and clear, speaking directly into her ear. You opened the door. The drain bubbled, foamed, and something began to rise. Sumin didn't move, didn't breathe. A shape emerged, not solid, not shadow, just form, hair, arms, a small face with lips moving to a song that had no words. The girl, Unji. She stood ankle-deep in the drain, though it should have been impossible. Her body was soaked, but her eyes dry. She reached out a hand. Sumin stepped forward, took it. The girl smiled faintly, then whispered, "They built over my grave, and they forgot my name, but you remembered." When she woke, she was lying on the bathroom floor again. Her hand was wet, but the floor was dry. The mirror was clean, but on the wall beside it, written in faint red letters, like rust drawn up from deep within the pipes, was a message. Not just me. She dug deeper into city records, found more death certificates tied to the original address, names never included in the public story. 12 children, all listed as missing, presumed deceased. No funerals, no memorials, just numbers in a ledger. And room 808 had been vacant 6 separate times over the past 20 years. Each tenant stayed less than a month. One had been found dead in the tub. 2 disappeared. The others moved out with no forwarding address, no trace, no explanation, no follow-up. She brought the nameplate to the old janitor the next day. He took it in his gnarled hands, stared at it for a long time. "I thought it was gone," he said quietly. "I thought when we sealed it, it would stay that way." He looked at her, eyes hollow. "But ghosts don't live in rooms. They live in memory." That night, the mirror fogged again. This time, no words,
Just a drawing, a door, a hand reaching through, and on the handle, the number 808 written backwards. A reflection, not a place, a portal, a way in, and maybe a way out.
The dreams changed. They were no longer fragmented glimpses of water and fire. Now they were invitations. Each night, Sumin found herself standing in the flooded hallway of the orphanage, barefoot and silent, watching as small hands waved to her from open doorways. The children never spoke, but their mouths moved, forming silent shapes over and over. She finally understood what they were saying. Come down and play. Back in waking life, the humming was no longer confined to the bathroom. It traveled through the walls, the floors, the vents. One night, she heard it from inside her bedroom closet. The next, from beneath the kitchen sink. It followed her like a shadow, always near, never loud, and always accompanied by that ache behind her eyes, like pressure building in her skull, waiting for release. She wasn't afraid anymore, but she wasn't safe either. Not from the spirit, not from herself. She visited the tenants on her floor, just to ask, just to know. The woman in 807 answered through a crack in the door. Her eyes were sunken, her voice trembled. "Do you hear it too?" Sumin asked softly. The woman nodded. "I left rice outside once. It was gone by morning." She hesitated. "Do you know who she is?" "She's the one who knocks," the woman said, then shut the door without another word. In 8010, no one answered. She later learned from the security desk that the man who lived there had moved out 2 days ago. No notice, no explanation, just vanished. The building's forums had no mention of room 808, but in cached pages, buried in digital dust, she found an old comment from years ago. "There's something in the walls. It sings, 'Don't open the bathroom door at 3:08, ever.'" The account had been deleted, the thread removed, but the timestamp remained. 3:08 a.m. That night, she didn't wait. At 2:45, she sat cross-legged in the hallway, facing the bathroom. A single candle burned beside her. In her hands, the drawing from the mirror, the backwards 808, the hand reaching out. She folded the paper and placed it on the floor. Then she whispered into the quiet, "I'm here. I'm listening." The candle flickered, and the humming began. The bathroom door creaked open on its own, just slightly. Steam rolled out, but she hadn't used any water. She stood, barefoot, and stepped inside. The mirror was completely fogged. A message written in sharp, uneven letters. "Come down." The drain gurgled, then spat. The water rose, slow but steady, swirling around her feet. Warmer than usual, almost comforting. She knelt beside it, her voice barely a whisper. "Why me?" The water rippled, and a child's voice responded, not humming this time, speaking, clear. "We're the only one who stayed." The apartment changed after that. It was subtle at first. Her lights flickered even when the power was stable.
Her smart speaker stopped responding entirely, except at 3:08 a.m., when it whispered her name. The walls grew colder, but only on her side of the apartment. Her neighbors, when asked, said they felt nothing. No chill, no humming, no ghosts. Just her. Just 8:08. She began finding puddles in other rooms. In her bedroom. In the hallway. Under her pillow once. Always at 3:08 a.m. Always accompanied by a faint smell of mildew and childhood. Soap, old wood, wet books. Memories she didn't recognize, but missed all the same. One night, the mirror fogged in complete silence. She hadn't spoken, hadn't asked, but the message appeared anyway. We miss you. It's better down here. No one forgets you down here. She traced the letters with her finger, and the glass pulsed, soft, alive. The next day, she tried to leave the apartment, just for fresh air, but the elevator stopped between floors. The lights died, the walls groaned, and when the emergency lights flickered on, she saw it. In the corner, small, crouched, wet footprints leading into the wall. She pressed the emergency call button. No response. When the doors finally opened, she was back on the 8th floor. She never pressed the button, never told it where to go, but somehow it brought her back home. She sat at her desk that evening and opened her journal. She hadn't written in days, maybe weeks. She turned to the last page. It was filled with unfamiliar handwriting, slanted, childish, a list of names, 12 of them, each with a small drawing beside it, stick figures, boys, girls, smiling. At the bottom, one more name, Su Min. Beside it, a drawing of a stick figure with no mouth. At 3:08 a.m., the drain in the kitchen sang. The one under the fridge. It gurgled, hummed, then whispered. We'll play hide and seek. You hide. We'll find you. We always do. She opened every drain in the apartment, bathroom, kitchen, even the floor grate near the washing machine. They all pulsed, breathed, and when she leaned close, they whispered her lullaby back to her, in her mother's voice. She returned to the sub-basement one final time. The door to room 8 was open again, but the water was gone. Now the floor was dry, the walls cleaner than before, as if something had finally been acknowledged. In the center of the room sat 12 small bowls, each filled with rice, and in the middle, a 13th bowl, empty, waiting. She stepped closer. A handprint appeared on the wall. Then another, until the entire room was covered, like children pressing against the veil between worlds. She whispered, I remember you. And the floor beneath her creaked, just once. When she returned to her apartment, the ribbon was gone. So was the drawing, and the nameplate. All vanished. But in the mirror, a single sentence appeared.
Now we play forever.
Sumin lit her stove for the first time in days. She boiled a pot of barley water, just like her grandmother used to do after funerals. The scent rose into the air like a memory, sweet and earthy, comforting, but beneath it, the sour undertone of mildew still lingered. No amount of boiling could cleanse what was underneath. The water hummed, just slightly, a familiar tune. She searched for hours before she found someone willing to speak with her. Most shamans wouldn't touch her case, too modern, too contaminated by electronics. One hung up the moment she mentioned smart home. Another told her to call a therapist. But one voice, old, slow, and raspy, simply said, "The girl who sings through the pipes? Yes, I know her." Her name was Young Nuk, a mudang from the southern edge of the Han River. People called her a fraud, a relic, a madwoman, but she was the only one who didn't laugh. She agreed to come at sundown. "Don't speak to her until I arrive. Don't answer the humming, even if she uses your name." The woman arrived barefoot, dressed in pale gray robes. Her hair was braided with red thread, her eyes sharp and impossibly dark. She brought no tools, no drums, no bells, only a small bundle wrapped in yellow silk. She stepped inside the apartment and stopped, inhaled. "Too late," she murmured. "What?" Sumin asked. "She knows you," the mudang said. "You've already answered." She walked toward the bathroom, paused, turned. "Where is the water deepest?" Sumin led her to the kitchen, to the drain beneath the refrigerator, the one that had first called her name through the smart speaker. The mudang knelt, unwrapped the yellow bundle. Inside were three things: a strip of white cloth embroidered with faded characters, a shard of mirror broken at the edges, and a bundle of scorched sage tied with black hair. She placed the mirror over the drain, face down, then lit the sage and traced a circle around them. The smoke rose, bitter, almost metallic. Then she began to hum. Not the same lullaby, a different tune, shrill, jagged, unsettling, a sound meant to disrupt. The pipes responded instantly. They groaned, knocked, cried. The lights flickered. Water began to bubble up from every drain in the apartment, gurgling violently as if something was being forced out. Then a voice rose from below, high, cracked. "Stop! It's mine! You're too late!" The mudang's humming grew louder. She reached into the drain with her bare hand. Her arm disappeared up to the elbow. She trembled. Sweat poured from her temples. Then, with a sharp motion, she pulled her hand back, clutching something invisible. She threw it onto the floor, and the mirror shattered. The sage erupted in flame, and the bathroom door slammed shut on its own. For a moment, there was silence. Then the walls screamed, a sound Sumin would never forget. Dozens of children's voices wailing in unison, fury, grief, betrayal, all at once, echoing from every drain, every pipe, every crack in the apartment. The lights flickered, the lights died, and then nothing. The mudang collapsed onto the floor. Sumin rushed to her, helped her sit upright. Her lips were pale, her voice a whisper. "She won't forgive." "But I thought—" The old woman shook her head. She wasn't angry, not at first. She was lonely. "But now? Now you've tried to cast her out." The silence grew dense again. "She'll come back, but next time she won't ask nicely." Sumin felt her throat tighten. "What do I do?" The woman looked at her with eyes like ancient water. "You must choose." After she left, the apartment felt hollow.
Not empty, but like the eye of a storm. Nothing stirred, no humming, no footsteps, no fogged mirrors. But Sumin couldn't relax. She sat on the floor beside the broken mirror, staring at the shattered pieces. Each shard reflected her differently. In one, her smile looked like a stranger's. In another, her eyes were too wide. In a third, her mouth moved, though she made no sound. She swept them all into a cloth and buried them in the trash chute. Still, she felt watched from every corner. At 3:08 a.m., nothing happened. No lights, no water, no voice. But when she woke the next morning, the bedroom mirror had a handprint on the inside of the glass. Faint, child-sized, still wet. She called the mudong again. No answer. She called 3 more times. Eventually, a younger voice picked up. "Who is this?" the girl asked. "I need to speak to young Nuk," Sumin said. A pause. "I'm sorry, my grandmother passed away this morning." Sumin's blood turned cold. "How?" "She drowned," the girl whispered. "In the bath." Sumin didn't cry. She simply ended the call, walked to her bathroom, and turned on the faucet. The water ran clear, normal. She plugged the drain, let it fill, then stared into the surface. It shimmered, rippled, reflected her face and another, just behind her, small, smiling. The next day, she received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph, old, cracked. A group of children standing in 2 neat rows, familiar uniforms, familiar wall behind them. She scanned the faces, then froze. There, at the edge of the second row, was a girl with a crooked ribbon in her hair, and beside her, someone that made her heart stop. Her mother as a child, standing right next to Enji, smiling. She turned the photo over. One sentence was written on the back in faint, looping handwriting. "She sang to me first." That night, Sumin sat in the center of the living room, surrounded by bowls of warm rice, one for each child, 12 total. She placed a 13th bowl in front of her, then lit a single candle. She didn't chant, didn't pray, just whispered, "I'm sorry," and waited. The lights flickered, the rice steamed, and the mirror fogged. A final message appeared. "You remember now. That's enough." Then it slowly melted away.
Sumin stopped checking the time. By now, she didn't need a clock to know when it was 3:08 a.m. Her body knew. Her blood knew. Each night, she felt it, like a quiet knock beneath her skin, like her bones were being tuned to a song only the dead could hear. And when she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw a reflection. She saw a threshold. The apartment grew colder by the day, not from weather, not from season, but from something internal. The walls seemed to pulse, the floors sighed. Her breath lingered longer in the air, curling like incense smoke, even when nothing burned. She stopped opening the blinds. There was no point. Whatever haunted her didn't come from outside. One afternoon, she found herself standing in her mother's old bedroom, the room she had locked up after the funeral, the room she swore she'd never enter again. Dust lay thick on every surface. A half-finished scarf still clung to a knitting needle. A cracked photograph of Sumin as a child sat beside a dried-out vase of lilies. And beneath the bed, a shoebox. She pulled it out. Inside, papers, drawings,
scraps of hospital documents, and a notebook. She opened it. Page after page of sketches. The drain, the girl, the song. But one drawing stopped her heart. It was a child's face, wet hair, wide eyes, and lips stained purple. Beneath it, her mother had written, "She breathes through me. When I sleep, she sings. When I wake, she waits. When I die, she'll be alone again." Sumin closed the book slowly, then whispered, "You knew." And the room suddenly felt smaller, as if it too had heard her. That night, Sumin returned to the bathroom, lit no candles, spoke no prayers. She simply stood before the mirror and waited. The fog came, not from breath, but from memory. It spread across the glass like frost, then cleared just enough to show a face. Not hers, the girl with purple lips. Not angry, not smiling, just watching. Sumin whispered, "What do you want from me?" And the mirror fogged over again. This time, 3 words. "Come remember me." The next morning, she called the psychiatric facility that had treated her mother, told them she was a family member, told them she needed records. At first, they refused, but eventually, one nurse, older, kinder, agreed to help. "We don't usually do this, but your mother's file, it's strange." "What do you mean?" Sumin asked. The nurse hesitated. "There are pages missing, notes blacked out, but there was one thing that kept repeating." She paused, then read aloud. "Recurring hallucination, small girl with saturated lips, wet hair, and humming. Patient believes the girl lives in the drain. Patient claims spirit is linked to daughter. Patient states daughter must not hear the lullaby or she will follow." The phone line went silent. Sumin whispered, "But I did hear it." And the nurse replied, gently, "Then maybe it's not a hallucination after all." That night, she dreamed again. But this time, she didn't resist. She followed the sound, through hallways drowned in moonlight, through doorways dripping black water, until she found herself standing in room 8. Only now, it wasn't burned. It was perfect. Beds made, windows open, laughter in the air. And at the center, on the floor, sat a girl, 6 years old, hair slick with water, skin pale, lips stained a vivid, unnatural purple, as if from berries or lack of oxygen. Unji. She looked up and smiled. Sumin note. The girl reached out and touched her face, cold fingers, gentle. And then she spoke, not in a whisper, not in song, but clearly. "Your mother promised she'd come back." Sumin felt tears rise. "She tried. She really did." Unji's smile faded. "She broke her promise." The light in the room dimmed. The windows began to fog. "I waited alone, all this time. I didn't know. I was just a child." Unji tilted her head. "So was I." Sumin woke with her pillow soaked in tears, and something cold pressed to her chest. She reached under her blanket and pulled out a toy, a small plastic figurine, worn, old, a ballerina missing one arm. She stared at it in disbelief. She'd seen it before, in her mother's drawings, always in the girl's hand, always beside the drain. She placed it on the bathroom floor, right next to the drain, and waited. At 3:08 a.m., the lights flickered, and the ballerina slowly spun once, all on its own. The next day, Su-min returned to the sub-basement. She didn't ask permission, didn't notify anyone. She simply descended, step by step, into the drowned bones of the orphanage. This time, the water was gone. The room was dry. Dust covered everything. But in the center of the floor was a small mirror, cracked, framed with rust. She knelt before it and saw a girl's face, Unji, still, pale, watching her. Then behind the girl, for the first time, Su-min saw others, 11 of them, flickering like candlelight, watching, waiting. She whispered, "I see you." And the mirror cracked further, not broken, just splitting, opening. Back in her apartment, she found something new, a photograph, sitting on her desk. It hadn't been there that morning. She picked it up with trembling fingers. It showed her mother, aged 10, standing beside a water pump, smiling, and behind her, the same girl, wet hair, purple lips. A shadow that had followed her mother all her life, and now followed her. That night, the mirror fogged one final time, but there were no words, just a reflection. Su-min's own face, and behind her, not a ghost, but a girl holding her hand. Su-min no longer heard the world the same way. Even in daylight, she could pick up faint echoes in the pipes, half-sung lullabies drifting beneath the chatter of faucets. The apartment above her groaned like old wood, but she knew it wasn't structural. It was breathing. There was no distinction between waking and dreaming anymore. The ghost no longer visited at night. She was always there, in every reflection, every whisper in water, every hush behind closed doors. Su-min stopped leaving the apartment, stopped answering messages, stopped eating, except for spoonfuls of rice she left beside the drain each morning. Her world had narrowed to one truth. The girl was waiting. The others were watching, and she had one task left: to descend. At sunset, she dressed in white, not ceremonial, not dramatic, just a simple dress her mother used in the hospital. Soft cotton, loose sleeves, frayed hem. She stepped barefoot through her apartment. Every light flickered on as she passed, her smart devices powered down one by one. No fanfare, just quiet surrender. At exactly 3:08 a.m., she opened the bathroom door. The drain was already bubbling. The air was warm and wet, like a lung exhaling after years of silence. She stepped inside and knelt. "I'm ready," she whispered. The pipes groaned in response. The mirror fogged instantly. A single word appeared: "Come." She returned to the sub-basement one final time. The hatch groaned open. The stairs moaned. But there was no fear in her now, only memory. She passed the burned hallway, room 8, the familiar scorched floor. Only now it was pristine. The water had returned, clear and glowing like moonlight on glass. In the center of the room, 12 children stood waist-deep, silent, still.
and at the front, her, Unji, wearing the same pink ribbon Sumin had once found floating in her sink. Their eyes met, and without a word, the girl held out her hand. Sumin stepped into the water. Cold wrapped around her ankles like hands. She waded forward, each step pulling her deeper, past the rusted bunk beds, past toys half submerged in silence, until she stood face to face with the girl whose voice had haunted her every night. Unji's lips moved, no sound, but Sumin heard her somehow from inside her own ribs. "You came back." She nodded and whispered, "I'm sorry it took so long." The girl touched her wrist. The bruises from weeks ago reappeared, faint purple fingerprints like faded ink. "Do you remember me now?" the girl asked. Sumin knelt, held the small hands in hers. "I do." Then the room began to flood, not violently, not in panic, just a slow, steady rising, as if the water was reclaiming what was always its own. The other children turned toward her. No smiles, no sorrow, just acceptance. And they began to hum, one by one. Their mouths opened, and the lullaby filled the chamber, soft, echoing off the tile, bouncing through time. Sumin felt herself swaying. The melody wrapped around her like a mother's arms. She closed her eyes and sang the next line. Her body sank, not downward, but inward, like folding into herself. Her skin felt lighter, her breath deeper. And when she opened her eyes again, she was standing in another room 8, dry, lit by sunlight, walls clean, sheets folded, children's laughter in the air. And beside her, Unji, dry now, no purple lips, just a girl, just a memory, smiling. "I'm not alone anymore," she said. And in that moment, neither was Sumin. Back in the real world, the apartment above grew still. Neighbors would later say they hadn't seen her in days. Her name would never appear in the building's records again. Room 808 would go back on the market, at a discount. The listing would describe it as quiet, newly available, unoccupied for months. But at 3:08 a.m., a new tenant would wake up and hear soft humming in the drain.
The listing went live at 6:13 a.m. Room 808 now available. Rare corner unit. Smart tech integrated. Quiet neighbors. Elevator access. Excellent view. No mention of water damage. No mention of former tenants. Certainly no mention of the girl in the drain. Just a discount price, a few photos, and a phrase meant to reassure. Previously unoccupied. A young man named Jae-hyun moved in 6 days later. Graphic designer. Quiet. Didn't talk much. He liked the silence. Said it helped him sleep. The apartment was perfect. Clean lines, modern tech, frosted mirrors, new floors. He unpacked slowly. Books first, then art supplies. Last came the speaker system, which he connected to his phone with ease. The AI responded quickly. Polite, efficient, just a little too cheerful. Exactly what he wanted. He didn't ask about the small dark stain in the corner of the kitchen floor, the one no bleach could lift. On his first night, at 3:08 a.m., he woke up suddenly. No sound, no lights, no movement, just cold. Not outside, inside, like something breathing across his bones. He blinked, rolled over, told himself it was nothing. Just nerves, just new walls settling. But the next morning he noticed something odd.
The bathroom mirror had fogged, though he hadn't used hot water. He wiped it clean and moved on. 2 nights later, the drain in the kitchen gurgled, just once, like someone clearing their throat underwater. Jae-hyun laughed. Weird plumbing, he thought. Maybe an old pipe. Maybe something shifting underground. But on the 5th night, the humming began. Faint, musical, a lullaby, slow and off-key. He woke to it drifting through the bathroom wall, soft, childlike. He turned on the light. Silence. But the mirror was fogged again. This time, a message. 3 words, scrawled by a hand too small to reach that high. Remember her name. He stared for a long time, then wiped it away. The next day, he asked the building manager about the previous tenant. The woman hesitated, then offered a tight-lipped smile. She moved out quietly, she said, didn't leave a forwarding address. That wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Back in his apartment, Jae-hyun began to feel things. Moments. Pressure in the floorboards. Whispers when he washed his face. And the oddest thing, he'd started humming, without realizing it. The same 8 notes. The same rhythm. Again and again. He found the ballerina in the cupboard beneath the sink. Armless. Worn. But clearly kept. He didn't throw it away. He placed it beside the bathroom mirror. That night, it spun on its own. He started seeing her in reflections. First a blur, then a shape, then a girl, standing behind him, dripping, silent. Not smiling, not cruel, just there, watching, waiting. And each time she looked a little closer, a little clearer, like water rising around his feet. He asked the AI to disconnect from the drains. It refused. He reset the speaker. It came back online at 3:08 a.m., whispering a name he didn't recognize. Unji. On his 7th night, he woke to a handprint on the mirror and a single bowl of rice on the bathroom floor, still steaming. He didn't cook it. He hadn't even bought rice, but it was there, waiting. He placed the ballerina next to it and said aloud, "I see you." No response, just a soft knock from inside the wall. By the end of the month, no one had seen Jae-hyun leave his unit. Packages piled outside his door, emails went unanswered. The lights still flickered inside, faint shadows passed by the window, but the door never opened. And from behind it, faintly, neighbors sometimes heard the echo of a lullaby, always at the same time, 3:08 a.m. The building manager updated the file. Room 808, occupied, no complaints, quiet tenant, no service requests. A perfect resident. And beneath the floor, beneath the steel and concrete, the drain still sang, the children still watched, and the girl with purple lips still waited. Because the room was never just a room. It was a memory, a ritual, a door. And once it opened, it never really closed.